so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush. I wanna taste your content, hold your breath and feel the tension. Devils hide behind redemption. Honesty is a one-way gate to hell. I wanna taste consumption, breathe faster to waste oxygen. Hear the children sing aloud. It's music till the wick burns out. Just wanna be carefree lately, yeah. Just kicking up daisies. Got one too many quarters in my pockets. Counting like the four-leaf clovers in my locket. Untied laces, yeah. Just tripping on daydreams. Got dirty little lullabies playing on repeat. Might as well just ride around the nursery and count sheep.
Yeah. Unknown brain. Marvin Divine. I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming, it's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
I know that I gotta stay away from all your games, yeah. I know that I find somebody else to love me one day, yeah. You'll realize the grass ain't greener on the other side, no. You did me dirty for the last time, so now I gotta say goodbye. So now I gotta say goodbye.
Good morning. Welcome. Today is going to be a little bit of an odd stream for us. The big game jam that we've been planning for starts tomorrow, officially. My fiance and the kids are out of town, so I will be streaming, although I normally wouldn't stream on a Saturday. But I will be streaming tomorrow so that we can get a head start on the game jam. I want to try to get through the planning phase of things tomorrow so that I can work a little bit over the weekend off stream. That's kind of the high level goal. In order to facilitate that, we're going to be doing some of the more support oriented things today. Think things like setting up the empty Git repo and getting our game design doc and our like workspaces and things like that all set up so that we're good to go. I just kind of want to clear everything out of the way. That way we can just jump straight into it as soon as the stream starts tomorrow, since the announcement will happen, I want to say 2 hours before our normal stream time. And I'm not a morning person to begin with, so I will be up and on stream as early as I can, which will probably be about our normal time. I've only been awake for maybe 2 hours now anyways, so, and that's abnormal for me on most days. Just heads up, I am still sick. I'm not feeling particularly great. I'm still very weak and achy and stuff. So I will likely be having to take a few more breaks than usual to get up and move so things don't lock up, and hopefully cough off of microphone so you guys don't have to hear it. The main effect is going to be that today will be a shorter stream. I don't plan on running our stream for too terribly long today, just because, again, I don't feel particularly great. I also don't have a lot of content to cover today. I'm trying to avoid jumping into too much game dev because I'm trying to take it easy today. And I don't want to burn myself out on things, so balance. So let me find a couple things real quick and then we can get that pulled up. So yeah. Oh, that was weird. Alright, so if we switch over to desktop, resize. There we go. So this is going to be the Game Jam 18 for Pyro Software. I ended up, just for a history on this, these two were the game jams that we talked about previously. These are the two I competed in. This one for sure. Pretty sure this was the one. Yeah. I attempted to join this, threw out some ideas, and then life happened, and so I couldn't actually do anything for this one. But the Game Jam 15, and then like 2 weeks later, pretty much win. I think this one, I think I had like a week downtime. I think it ended on like the 7th or something like that. But these were the two game jams that we did. Well, this one wasn't good though. This one wasn't good though. This is when I really started getting into game dev stuff, and then haven't had a chance to touch it since. And I have other projects that sit in here. So we're gonna do. What's the actual title for this? We'll call it Pirate Software Game Jam 18. Yeah. So there's a few things we need to do to this. The first thing I want to do is I want to create a actually there for this game jam in particular. I don't know, let's do it this way. Let's create a game design doc. Let's just look at their page and see what the requirements are. Let's do it that way. Must include a game design doc. I don't think they actually describe GDD. So it has to be a Google Drive file. And they give a sample. Technically, they don't define what it needs to look like, just that they have a sample and it must be uploaded to Google Drive. In which case, let me see if I can find the example for this. I don't know if they have an example of. Also, I don't think this is the one I'm thinking of. I recently saw a take on game design docs that kept it to about a 1-page that I actually really liked. Here it is. It's from the Indie Game Clinic. I don't know if they. Let me see if I can find a example using their approach. No, I think we're just gonna have to recreate it from their video, unfortunately. Yes, I watch this as a video. This is the kind of things I watch in my free time. I'm just going to jump to different areas to grab headings on how they're handling it, because I really like the, not all of it, but at least there's like 3 major headings. So the first heading they had was, I don't think this is relevant to us. Well, I guess it is. There was the very first one was a heading 1. What is where this went into a description. So something like game name is a, I don't want to use their exact example. That's more or less the vibe I'm getting from their write-up, is effectively your game's name, the style and genre. And so in the case of this example I'm looking at, their game's name is Prophecy. So Prophecy is a top-down multiplayer simulation game. So style, genre. And then where, and then their hook is that each player represents a prophet followed by a growing swarm of followers. It's just their hook. A 1-sentence, think elevator pitch that tries to high level summarize it. Then you state the something like the goal. I don't know how I'll label this. Let's do goal. Their goal is to traverse a procedurally generated world, converting followers, conquering foes. Goal, primary tasks. Secondary tasks. Win con. So what's your high level goal? So in their case, traverse a procedurally generated world, converting followers, a goal, which includes your primary and secondary tasks. So converting followers, conquering foes, obtaining resources, and then your win condition is winning for as long, or sorry, surviving for as long as possible. And then in their case in particular, they have an additional one that's the game blends some elements of traditional God games like Populous, Black and White, with a simplified battle royale model similar to Agario. And so the last one here is examples. Examples of similar games / parts pulled from other games. So we have our elevator pitch, followed by primary and secondary tasks and win conditions, and then examples of parts we pulled from other things. So in their case, they mention, traditional God games like Populous and Black and White, and then a simplified battle royale similar to Agario. That's kind of the structure of what we're going for here. It gives everything we need to execute on this, to be honest, at a high level. And then they follow this up with images of examples. In their case, I like how they did it. So I'm actually going to grab, if I can, here. Let me just copy this to our clipboard. This is the example they give. This is a picture of the two added together equals this. I like this structure. I probably won't use it verbatim, but in the next step, the next section that was relevant for us is design pillars. I don't want to put a description of design pillars here, which is what their first one is. So let's get past that. And so in particular, to flush this out, they pulled from here we go. 14 forms of fun. And so we want to, I also like the structure they used on this. So we're gonna use that. And then we want to populate in, ideally, I think we're also gonna go for the 3 structure they use. I like having 3 primary focuses. I want to insert a table that is 3. Right, undo. Insert table 3 by 2. And so it's going to be something along the lines of, let me select all of these and align center, and then we will set these to heading 3 so they're a little bit larger, and then option 1, option 2, option 3. Something along those lines. Description of how it relates to our game. There. So this will give us our 3 design pillars that we're going to follow, as well as a description of specifically how this relates to us. And so the example game that he's using, the first one that he gives is Power. Again, pulled from directly from here, Power. And then the description of how it relates to Prophecy, again, the game that he's giving the example of. Satisfaction will come from players seeing their flock grow larger and larger as gameplay progresses. So how do we relate it back to our game concept? And then these will be the what we use to make our primary decisions about the game when we're talking, like, should something be included or not, for example. Right. And then I believe this next section is something we will be skipping, but audience and market is their next section. So the game played online with online single player through itch.io. And then we can additionally include something along the lines of like, you know, teen audience, teen-adult audience with, you know, dark humor aspects, something along that. So we want to include our age group. Something along those lines. So we have, this is going to be a blanket one for us. As part of a game jam, I don't want to tackle a multiplayer game. That's maybe if we were building it in web tech and our renderer was stupid, dummy simple, then maybe. But we can't use peer-to-peer. So we would have to do as an MMO setup, which we haven't done before. Although we do know how to do WebSocket connection. So, I mean, I guess we could. We know how to connect to a WebSocket, over WebSocket to a server. So in theory, I guess we could. Although then we run into weird cores issues and stuff like that because it's web hosted. It's just not worth it. The amount of effort that would go into getting our server established is probably half of our time dedication, just getting the connections up and running without building any of the game. So if we were on a team, then sure, maybe, you know, but not being on a team, it's not worth it. So a single player game designed to be played online through itch.io. It's, I guess, technically to be a single player experience hosted itch.io on the web. We don't have to mention that it's online. It's a web build. Technically, it doesn't require you to be online. You could technically go offline as soon as you downloaded it. So, and then if we have an age group or any sort of requirements that would restrict it, stuff like that, that should go in here as well. All right. Now, is this next section the one I wanted to skip? All right. I'll let it run for a second. I need to get the title, and it was not showing up in the scrubbing. The next section was core gameplay. Definitely keeping this one. So, control scheme was the first thing mentioned. So in their case, you control the prophet and then the followers AI pathfind to stay in the general vicinity. So if we go with a WASD, that would go here. And then, so this is control scheme. And then we have a section, well, the next section will be more focused on mechanics. if we have in their case a list of different types of things, we can bullet point them out, stuff like that. But this is more or less goes into this section. I can scrub forward and just double check there's nothing else in here. Sorry, my fiance is driving to go visit some friends. Well, I guess friend. And so when I see my phone go off and I know she's on the road, I always gotta check it real quick. Put that on the charger so it doesn't die. All right, this is more or less it for core gameplay. This is gonna be highly dependent on what we decide to build. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip past that. The only other thing I'm missing from this that he has is pictures of different ways of handling things. So he also mentions progression systems, if there are any, and then has picture examples because he's using a tech tree, and so picture examples of what ideas he had for tech trees, stuff like that. All right, the next section, which I don't know if we'll have this one. I don't know if this would be relevant to our game in particular, whatever we end up building. But it is gameplay, balance, and pacing. Which is going to be things like how long is a run? We are explicitly rolling out anything multiplayer. So we don't need to worry about getting ahead or behind of some kind of curve. So we don't need catch-up mechanics. I mean, I guess depending on the single player game, there could be relevancy for catch-up mechanics. And the example he uses of one of these is things like Fortnite fire coaling area. You know, anything gating unlock, time locked. Another example of this would be time locked progression systems, things like that. Again, that's going to be highly dependent on what we end up building, so I just want to kind of mark out an area for it in our doc so we don't forget about it. Next section he highlights is, character designs, and this is going to be more art focused. So, art style of the game, inspirations that we're drawing from. So this would include pictures if we have any, you know, color palette. Actually, we specifically want to avoid color palettes here. Anything else we can think of that would go into the character design? Again, the goal for this is to keep it as short and concise as possible. We don't want to spend the entire event doc writing, which is also why we're doing this prep work, so we can avoid that, as much of that as possible. So the next step is setting and world. So in their case, Goal is a procedurally generated world. However, the prototype will be a vertical slice of the game. So this is where we include things like procedural generation. How is this altered for prototype? I'll leave that at the end. So we have like things that would go into here would be like world, landscape, structure, layout. We need to know things like overworld versus game world versus whatever structures, things like that. We could also include hints about, no, we don't want to include stylistic things in here because the next section is tone and aesthetics, which is going to be our details about visual style and iconography. As well as any inspirations. Just because I like the, let me see if I can get a good picture of this. This is the example that we're running off of for this. So tone and aesthetics inspiration comes from rich but moody color palette of biblical epic movies like the Charlton Heston 10 Commandments and 80s dark fantasy like Conan. This is where he has color palette, historical epics. So examples are always really good to help us get an idea of what direction we want to go. Stuff like that. So going back over here, we've got visual style and iconography inspirations. Let's add color palette in here, stuff like that. All right, looks like our ad thing is off, so I'm gonna run it real quick. It looks like, I don't know why this is being weird, but we're gonna run ads real quick to disable pre-rolls once again. So I'll be right back while I grab some coffee. All right, and we are back. Oh, wrong scene. There we go. All right, so let's see what other sections might be relevant to us. If we have narrative, that would be a good one. I don't plan on including much narrative because, again, I am not a writer and I am not teaming up with any writers as of right now. I don't have any plans for that. It starts tomorrow, so unlikely. Will it have narrative? If so, how will it be provided to the player? And then they mentioned business model. I'm going to exclude that from ours just because, again, we're not, that's not something we want to deal with right now. Popping through here, I don't see any other sections. Yeah, okay. So this should give us a pretty good structural layout for a game design doc. It is pretty different from the Pirate Software's recommended one, so we are going to diff the two. I'm going to pop this one over here. All right. So what is our game? Introduction. So we have a game summary, and then they call out specifically inspiration as a section. We incorporate inspiration sporadically, which is one of the reasons I like about this structure over the design doc that they use as an example. I like the inspiration being tied to a specific section. So this is our inspiration at a high level, incorporated into this. But then later on, we call out specifics on how it incorporates in the different individual sections. Target platforms, which we include as part of our audience and market. Genre gets included as part of this. They separate audience and market for this doc is separate. So you have platform and then target audience as two separate things. They have a section called player experience, which is kind of tied to this last bit of this section, but it's also down here in a combination of these two. And then overview, so the concept and overview, which is realistically, that's where our gameplay sections come into play. And then art talks about the design, theme interpretation, audio, and stuff like that. And so that's where this is going to come in. We should probably include a note about audio and SFX. Theme, design choices, something like that. I will not be including, because the example document includes game experience for UI and controls as a segment in here. I'm going to explicitly ignore that. I'm also going to ignore their development timeline sections. Because this, again, there's excluding those two sections is an 8-page document. Ideally, in a perfect world, I can do some image swapping and just... Oh, little kitty, okay? I can do some image swapping and just replace text, and we have effectively a 2-page document. By the time we add in a couple more images in a few of these sections, it might go up to a 3, at most 4-page document. With theirs, once it's fully fleshed out with everything, it's a 10-page document for this example. Ours could be, assuming we can replace everything in a 1-to-1 or a 10-page document. Trimming some of these sections, we might go down to a 8, maybe 7-page document, but still, that's still twice the length of what we're talking about over here. So, again, in a perfect world, I can get this down to a 1-page document. That's what I want. I want to be able to throw together something to tick this box, give me a high-level direction that I can refer back to, but also leave it flexible enough that if I need to make changes, I'm not rewriting a document constantly. Because, again, my goal is to iterate and move fast. I don't want to be locked down or tied into some design. In some ways, it's helpful, because I can just do the planning and make a decision and move forward with that as my, North Star kind of thing, is what their whole argument is for it. But I'm not a seasoned game dev. I'm not going to have, I'm going to back and forth. I'm going to have to update things. I'm going to have to make changes over time and stuff like that. And so I definitely need that flexibility that it offers me. Sorry, that. Ugh. Coffee went down the wrong pipe. Alright, so this gives us a start on our... Here, let me adjust my mic so I don't have to lean forward. This gives us a good starting point when we want to jump into our game design doc once the project starts. Let's see. Is there anything else we can think of? I know I need to create a Git repo. Get that wired up in an empty repo, hooked in an empty project set up. So I guess let's start with... I really want to move off of GitHub with everything that Microsoft's doing right now, but I'm so wired into it at this point and everything's already set up, it's hard to migrate on these kinds of things. Unless they start actively screwing me over or charging me for stuff that is labeled as free and things like that. And I guess I'm not going to worry about it too much. Create new repository. We're just going to call this Our Software Game Jam 18. Sure, we'll make it... we better make it private. I'll probably change this to public when the game jam's over, depending on if we decide to move forward with it and turn this into a full game, we'll leave it as private, but most likely we'll, tidy it up a little bit and just call it public. We don't really want anything else on here. I guess we can put a license on it for Apache. All right, we have an empty repository. Let me grab the SSH key. There we go. And then I should be able to start up a terminal. Git clone. There we go. And then we should be able to ps dash. And then in Godot, we're going to create Power Software Game Jam 18. PS-game-jam-18. Let me just make sure this is linked correctly. Projects. There we go. select this folder. The entire contents of the folder will be imported as project resources. Okay. All right, so we should be able to create a new scene. This will be our game scene. I'm assuming we're going to be running it in 2D because that's what we've been doing so far. Unless we have a real good incentive to run it as a 3D game, that is the path we will continue to move forward down. All right, so let's close that. Okay, we got a project in our game scene. Perfect. We got our design doc. What else have we done for prior game jams? I did this one with the team, which is why we have team availability. Design doc. We used this for brainstorming. And this was sharing of our sprites. Ideas. So these two were for, this was for ideation and this was for refinement, and then we turn it into a design doc. In our case, this time around, I would like to use, oh, let me log in. Milanote. So we got the one button that was going on here and the one bit that was going on here. It seems you get exactly one board. Interesting. Yeah. So if we want to use this, we're going to have to delete some of these old ones. Is there a way to export? Oh, hey, there's an export right there. Oh, it only shows up once you go into one of these. Let's generate a PNG. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know what this is going to look like. That's unfortunate. So it gave us this board. Unfortunately, we've got an entire section in here. So we need to go through and create. We would have to go through and export a PNG for each of these. Oh, here's a subboard. Let's generate a markdown. We lose anything drawn when we do that. At least as a markdown. What if we create a Word doc? I don't know if we can even open this on here. PNG SCVG. What is this? Nope, that's not what I thought it was. DocX. Can we even open this? Yeah, I don't even have a tool to open that with. Let me do this. LibreOffice, that's the name of it. I wonder what the draw is capable of. I'm gonna download that and see how well that works with my pen. And we need writer is the one we specifically need. It looks like it flagged all of the LibreOffice suite for none of the dependencies, but looks like it got the entire suite segment, all the main things for it under the official repository. So we should be good. There we go. Get that going. That should solve that problem here in a second. I wonder if it's... It's unfortunate that... I mean, I understand why. The more of a pain in the ass it is for me to collect these, the more likely it is that I will pay for their paid product. So I fully understand why companies do this. It just sucks. You know what I mean? Export. The one option that would make this nice and easy, of course, doesn't work. Can I do a PNG with that flag and get the entire thing? I think this is just going to convert the current board, though. Yeah, that's what it looks like. All right, let's see if I can LibreOffice. Even though LibreOffice would support images, it does not give images. It converts all of the cards into text. So areas where I'm using things like this, typing games, there's a header called typing games. It's not even X'd out or anything. It's just there. So anywhere that we drew a line is lost. Though repeating actions, events, roguelike, rhythm games, and roguelike are both under these, and typing games. So all of these show as subheadings, but they're not indented correctly, so we're losing the arrows as well. It defines ordering. Is it doing heading sizings at least? So repeating action games is heading 2, typing games, rhythm games, and roguelikes are all heading 2 as well. It doesn't look like we can get it heading 3 at any point. No, it's just heading 1 and heading 2 all the way down. just repeat use of heading 1, heading 2. So their conversion point for creating their linear versions of these is not good. Might be improved with their paid version. I don't know. I mean, I don't... You okay, buddy? Did that floor get you? Come here. You're okay. We have a little step that goes down, like one step, coming out of the bedroom into my office area, and Zeke slipped going down it. It's getting harder and harder for him to move around. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. I don't know if there's a way we can store these well. So let's check our tools. Because realistically, what I want out of this is this. I want a board I can do this stuff on. If I have to delete everything else, I just create one of these and then upload the image to a drive every time I finish one, so be it. But alternatively, we go to here. I mean, I don't know how well this works. I can do shapes and lines and stuff, but oh, I don't want to maximize that. I want to keep that is not what I wanted at all. Let's try this again. Boom. Hello, welcome. Let's see if we can use our stylus for this. Because honestly, we're not losing a whole lot off Milanote if we can't export anything. Where's my stylus? It is not locked to the screen, which is unfortunate. I don't like that's doing selection, but I think this is set to selection. So what if we... I don't know if we're still connected. We are. It must be Chrome that just crashed. Or maybe this exact tab. Oh, is that tab? Okay, good. Hi. I don't think I can freeform draw on this. It's very misleading when it's literally labeled draw. Scribble. So if I click on Scribble, will that let me just free draw? It does. None of my quick ref tools work though, which will make this a pain. Also, every time I draw something in here, it's now frozen. I can't refresh the tab either. So I have to kill the tab and restart it every time. So that's not going to be an option for us, that's for sure. Alright, well, let's delete that. Let's check out LibreOffice. Sure, we'll leave that on. I do that. So if they should have an option to rotate the layout. We'll figure that in a second. Once again, this should swap tools. No. This one also doesn't want like to work. Let's rotate this to landscape. We should be able to get surely they have a free draw functions. No. I mean, I can draw lines, obviously. It's not super helpful, though. I don't see a free draw in here. I mean, the closest we have is this. But technically... Oh, it resets every time. Man, that's annoying. Don't save that. Yeah, I'll have to figure something out. The A sprite does exactly what I want it to do. With, I think it required me to like set up one button. And that was it. And it just worked. So I am going to have to fiddle with something, get something up and running that works better than that. Because that's not acceptable. We'll figure something out. All right, so what else do we want to do? We created our Git repo. We started the layout for our GDD so that we can just fill that in. I guess I don't think I need any of these. We're done with both of these, so to be honest, we can just delete. And then let's add a board. Let's do... Actually, if I do the game design document, what'd they call it? They just call it brainstorming? I wonder if that's a... Game design brainstorming. I kind of like this layout, I'm not gonna lie. So if we create this, we can encapsulate everything that would go into our GDD into here to help us ideate more image oriented, which is how I tend to function, into this structure, which we can then export back into a proper game design doc. We can refine it back into that. Give it a second. And then additionally, outside of this, we can create another board that is our ideation. Damn, I was hoping they keep the theme names. I like those. I guess we don't really need them. As we go, we can do that. That's fine. So let's rename this to 23 cards. That's a quarter of our total allotment. Wow. So let's rename this to GDD brainstorm. And then we will add another board. And this one is going to be let's call this one ideation. And we're going to use, technically we just need an empty board. And so we can just drop a card in with our theme and run from it once the theme is announced tomorrow. We are going to need to clean up this one at some point, so I guess we can go ahead and pop through that now. So let's grab these main topics. So we want gameplay to be one of these. That's going to be an important one for us. Maybe we do tone and aesthetics and then settings and world. Here, let's do this. Weird. We went to more and brainstorm. And then we found game design brainstorming. It was gameplay, story, characters, and levels. So you did gameplay, story, characters, and levels. I don't know if we're going to need levels, and even if we do, I don't think we would include it in this initial one anyways. We'd probably either not have a section for it or do it in its own standalone thing. So yeah, let's go back to this. Let's do setting and world, and then I don't know if we want to do a character design one. Let's do our visual theme. And then if we want to do anything for world design. And for now, we're just going to get rid of this. Can I combine these together? That's not how I wanted them to connect. Alignment? No. There is no way for me to connect these without dropping them inside of something, it seems. Which is going to make linking this kind of difficult. Let's do it this way. You get centered down here. You left aligned. And then you can be right aligned. And we'll link you. Let's grab all of it and move it up. All right. This gives us a slightly better area to work with. Let me grab all of you. Something like that. And then let's make these a little more uniform. So I like this alignment the most, to be honest. So we're just going to grab, copy, delete all that, paste. Drop you right about. That looks good. And something like that looks good. Actually, that's going to drive me crazy if I don't do this right. Let's do this. And this. That way the alignment on all these is correct. And then it was visual theme. This needs to go up. And world design. And then we will draw arrows to these. Let's move this over like that. There. This gives us a nice start point. Oops, I didn't mean to close that. I need to go back first. So we have our ideation, where we can just freeform, do whatever we need. Once we have that solidified and we know our general topic, then we can start brainstorming the main areas for our game design doc. Upon completion of that, we will want to export that to Google Drive, but mainly we're going to be refining it into a singular document to tick the box saying that we did the thing that is a requirement for the game jam. All that wind up in here. That will give us the everything I think we need. So all right, let's just do a quick read through. Make sure we've got all of our bases covered. How long we got until I add? 6 minutes? Okay. I guess we could. I guess. Let's pop open Discord. That's a lot of unread notifications. I am still on here from last year. I don't keep up with it. I need to be posting into their self-promo streaming. I've dropped in a few times on there, but man, it's a lot of unread notifications. Do self-promo programming. That's what we're looking for. Game jam programming. Jam LFG. I have it muted. I thought there was a... I probably have it hidden, to be honest. I'm real bad about hiding anything and everything. Let me go to the channels. Nope, what? Channels, not categories. Game dev, programming, streaming, gaming. I thought there was a section in here specifically for... Is it just under game dev? Game maker modding, jam LFG. Again, it's a channel, not a forum. I could have swore they had a forum section for doing LFG stuff. Scrolling through this real quick. There's an announcement channel for it. Doesn't help though. I wonder if there's a role that's hiding it. Is there a game jam role? I don't see one. Oh, let's go to that jam LFG. Let's just browse through this real quick, see if there are any teams looking. Is a composer looking for a team? Can I share this? I probably shouldn't share this on stream. Okay, so we do have a writer looking for a group, a composer looking for a group. I'd share this music, but I don't see anything on here about creative CCO or anything like that, so we don't know. It's like the second or third programmer. All these are posts from, this one's from 7:18 this morning, so 4 hours ago. This one's from yesterday, less than like 17 hours ago, something like that. Another composer. Lead designer and sound effects / voiceover looking for a team. Specialized in game mechanics, power / verb design, enemy / boss design, level design, and narrative. That's interesting. Some interesting posts on here. Again, I don't want to read too much about this. It does look like we have an ad that's going to start here in 50 seconds. So I did manage to figure out how to get, they call it the ads manager. Apparently, like a week after you gain access to it, it just gives you a notification. I don't know why it wouldn't do that when you immediately got access to it, but so I'm gonna read through this real quick. I don't know if we want to go down this path or not, but we'll see. Yeah, I am going to refill my coffee while this ad goes. It's gonna start here in 10 seconds, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop over to do that real quick. So give me just a second. All right, we are back. All right. So, fix this a little bit. Just gonna read through some of these rules. Don't be a dumbass. Got it. Obviously, follow terms and services. Limited to 5 people teams. GDD. Run in the browser, which we're set up for this. We got a build running in the browser, which means we have everything running locally for our Godot to export to the browser. That was one of the main reasons why I wanted to get a build out for the last game jam, even if I wasn't happy with the state of it. Don't sabotage, normal stuff. Be cool. No AI generated content. I'm not sure what they consider content. I know for a fact that it's going to be things like art. Content gets weird when you start deviating from that, because depending on the context, text is considered content, code is considered content. I'm willing to bet they're not referring to code under this. And the reason I say that is because we have in editor, like, obviously vibe coding going to be a problem, but vibe coding is creating more than just code in the context of a game. If content is ideas or like part of the ideation phase, that becomes an issue. If obviously art, voice, stuff like that. They also have a blanket statement on this, which is weird, because if you have someone on your team that is considered a voice actor or does voice acting, or maybe someone that doesn't do voice acting, but you want your team members to offer, like all of your team members offer up their voices, and you train an AI model and you run the AI model to do your voiceovers, that's AI generated content. But it's all like you all signed off on it. So it's weird there's a blanket statement on that one. If you get full buy-in and run your own AI model, I don't think there should be an issue. That being said, we're not doing that. The only issue that I see with us on this one is I do occasionally run, when I'm in VS Code, I use Copilot for my code completion, just because it gives me more context and can do a few lines of boilerplate instead of just the next word, like my normal autocomplete. It is AI driven. I wouldn't consider it AI generated content. I don't intend on using AI for anything image related or audio related or anything along those lines. Though we will need to make sure that any assets we grab are not AI generated. That is something we might have to worry about. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to care if it's... The goal is to not put artists out of work, is the high level goal. So if we're using art assets, we should get them from an artist. That being said, I think they're not going to use Oblivious as an excuse if they catch AI generated art because it came from a third party that used AI to generate it versus us using AI to generate it. It's still AI generated, you know what I mean? So we're not doing anything pornographic, or is there? Illicit drug references. That one's a weird one. Substance abuse and addiction is a common, I wouldn't go so far as to say common, but frequently used concept in not just games, but literature and other kinds of things. People telling their story and how it affected them. So I'm surprised they put that in here. I understand it from like TOS and on itch and TOS on Twitch and stuff like that. So I understand why it's here, but odd that because you can tell a story involving illicit drugs, you just can't promote drug use or anything along those lines. So odd, but it is what it is. It's easy enough for us to avoid. Assets you have commercial license for. Some assets pack only allow non-commercial use. Licensing limits intentions for build, blah, 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 to make things, game jam is a flex personal skills, not a personal wallet. Okay. Again, I'm about to make a statement that will change at some point in the future. But as a general statement, I tend to avoid paid assets. Not because I don't want to fund whatever. It's because when I'm doing game jams and small games and things like that, they are not a profitable thing. They were not meant to be a profitable thing. And so unless something happens and they become profitable, then I'll err on the side of free use assets. If they become profitable, then I will look into getting art done for them. And there's two reasons for that. One, I want to move fast, which means I don't want to wait for art to be done. Two, which means leads into the second one, in that since I'm not waiting for art to be done and I'm not paying for bespoke art, it means that I'm limited to what's on the store already, which means I'm already handicapping my visual and thematic design based on what's actively available, in which case I'm not going to want to pay for that. So that's the second reason. I don't want to pay for things that are going to limit my visual. And three is because of those first two, if it ever becomes a profitable thing, I will find an artist I like or work with one I've worked with before and get art done or music done. Well, I don't really. Music's a weird one for me. Good music can make or break a game. So having good music is important. Good sound effects, things like that. Getting decent sound effects for free, fairly easy. There are tools for that. Getting good music for free is nearly impossible because it needs to align with your game. So unless you go in to build your game with audio and music, like a specific song in mind to start with, getting an off-the-shelf song and throwing it into your game, with the exception of a few things, like obviously like Guitar Hero, for example, any song will work with that as long as it's, a banger. Throw in literally any song, you set up the gameplay to match it. In most games, though, that's not how it works. You want music that aligns with the emotions and beat you're trying to invoke in the user, and that's what makes it a good song for your game. Finding a song that aligns like that and getting access rights to it, throw it into your game and stuff like that is extremely unlikely. You're much better off getting a song made for your game. I don't have context for that. That's a hard one for me. So that one already puts me at a disadvantage, but it's something we can figure out down the road. I've worked with artists before. I have a few artists. I hit a key on my keyboard. As you can see behind me, we've had custom artwork done before. I work with a group that does D&D. I'm pretty sure I've said this on the stream before. I used to stream D&D. Like as a player, I was not a DM. I did DM once on that channel, but normally I don't DM. Not on stream, at least I don't DM. I do DM off stream. The stuff that I've worked with we've worked with artists on specific things before. I have not worked with any artists in games. I've worked with artists for web design stuff. Usually those tend to be more like marketing groups, more so than artists. Not to insult any of the artists that work at marketing firms. That is not my intention there. It's just you have business focused art and then you have creative focused art, and games fit into the creative sphere, not the business scope sphere. It is adjacent but different skill sets. But what I'm getting at is I've worked with artists before. I'm in touch with people that have worked with artists before when it comes to visual art, and I can get a hold of that fairly easily, and we can get custom bespoke art for our specific design. So if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to go that route. And so when I'm making games and game jams, when I'm making small games for like the Twitch game and stuff like that, until it becomes something intended to make a profit or starts making a profit, it doesn't make sense for me, logically, to go down the route of dumping money into it for assets like that when I can get away with free assets that will help me to get through the prototyping phase, or, you know, good enough to showcase what I'm trying to do and stuff like that. And so unless we start talking finishing a game to deploy, to dump onto, you know, Steam or something like that, until we get to that point, then there's no point in me going that route. This is what I'm getting at. So finding a free but commercially valid license for any assets we're going to be using is what we will be following here. And this is what I do every time we create a game. I already have 2 asset packs downloaded that I really like, that I tend to use for a lot of things. They are very fantasy driven though, so they might or might not work depending on what we do. We're good on game design doc. We went over that earlier when we were putting together our, for lack of a better word, scaffold. So prototype, very limited working copy of your game. Focus on playability over anything else. If it doesn't run, it won't win. Your prototype must run as a browser upload. Again, we talked about this before. When we did our last game jam, we deployed this into itch as a web build. So we have everything installed for our local build of Godot to be able to export to web. So that won't be an issue for us for this next one. Ease of use for judging and reduction in malware. Winners will be announced during dev stream. Okay. Voting criteria. This is going to be kind of important for us. So we'll vote on 4 major categories. As the games are subjective media, it causes category guidelines and judges to follow exploring your game. Don't worry about tricking the judges into liking your game. Use these as loose guidelines to make the best game possible. Don't overthink it. I like that. So first category. They mentioned 4, but they have 5 listed here. I guess the last one's judge's choice. But 4 main categories. Playability is the first one. Were systems in your game clunky or polished? This is probably the one that we will be able to... This is the one we will be best at. Or I will be best at. Because again, this is going to be all coding mechanics. Was the game tripping over itself when judges try to play it? Focus on playability. Make sure the build works. Most important category and counts for a lot. Getting systems functional and polished is what this entire category is about, which is where we're going to thrive here, just because this is the one that is the most coding heavy of all of them. The next one I would like to focus on is cleverness, which we'll get to in a second. But when it comes to playability, the hardest part for us in this one is going to be like the polish side of it. Getting it to a working and stable state in a 2-week period, not a huge problem for us. Getting it to where, you know, animations perfectly align with timing windows and things like that is going to be one of the harder ones for us, because that's a very visual oriented thing. Like an artistic style, like how do we want the flair for our polish to be? That is going to be the last bit, and that's going to be the hardest for us. But the coding portion of this, especially if we go with a mechanical, like coding heavy mechanical system, that one should be pretty straightforward for us, thankfully. So this is what we're going to be focusing a lot of our time on. Luckily for us, this is the most important category and counts for a lot. So that's going to be good. Next main one, theme implementation. I guess I can zoom this in. I don't have anything else going on this screen. Did your game follow the theme? Was the theme entirely ignored? Did you implement the theme in a clever and interesting way? These 2 will be easy for us. Based on our previous iterations on game jams, as you can saw, when a theme pops up, it is important for me to incorporate the theme. Specifically, I like it to not be surface level incorporation, just because when you're talking surface level, we're talking things like art style. We don't have access to custom art assets, so creating it from a thematic, what I call surface level, where it looks like the theme. So using the theme artistically isn't something that I can do, because we are not making our own art assets, and so I don't have access to what would be required to do that. Therefore, when we incorporate themes, we tend to incorporate, and again, I'm not a writer, so we don't do it from a narrative standpoint. So I try and incorporate my themes either directly or indirectly through the gameplay. So this part's easy for us to get past, as long as we can find a theme that jives with gameplay. And so if it's a vague enough theme that can fit it, we can work it with it. Clever and interesting, that one's a little bit harder, because this is a interpretation thing. Each judge is going to be different on if they think this approach is clever or not. Coming up with a design that's not overused shouldn't be too hard, but coming up with something that's novel that's always really difficult, because so many things have existed for so long. I think our main target is going to be, like we did with the 1-bit, avoid the first pass concepts. So Into the Depths was the theme for that. So anything dealing with deep sea water, we immediately want to throw out, just because that's the first time you hear depths, that's immediately where everybody's mind's going to go, is sea, either sea or caves. And that's just the most common interpretation. So avoiding those should at least help us distinguish ourselves, at least to some extent, from the other participants within the same game jam. So that should help us a little bit. Past that, barring a completely novel concept no one's ever seen before, which is extremely unlikely, this is going to be heavily up to interpretation. If they've seen it a dozen times before, yeah, that's another thing we have to worry about is, so Ember After Dark mentioned, going too clever could result in the opposite, where the judges don't get it. I agree. You want it to be clever and interesting, but identifiable. If your goal for the theme interpretation is going to be tied to gameplay mechanics, that means you need to be able to identify its relationship to the theme, but also you don't want to stray too far away from normal, like what we consider common mechanics, so that you have to spend the next 30 minutes of your 5-minute window of them playing your game explaining how it functions. You know what I mean? So there are the first 2 bullet points in this should be fairly easy for us to hit. Just, did we incorporate the theme? And, that's pretty much it. Incorporate the theme. How well we do with that is going to be up to us past that. As long as we're incorporating the theme, we're not going to bomb out on this. We want it to be interesting. We want it to be different from everybody else, or we don't want it to be the same theme everyone else is using. That's kind of the goal here. If there's 1 or 2 others that are using it in the same way, that's fine when we're looking at thousands of entries. But if 500 people all use the same theme as us, we're not going to get much points in creativity on that one. You know what I mean? So we'll have to keep that in mind. Cleverness. This is how unique is our mechanic, essentially. Maybe you told a story with an interesting, unique twist. The more clever you are, so this goes back to the cleverness concept up here, but independent of our theme. So we came up with a theme implementation. How well did we do implementing that theme into our game? And then the cleverness here is how unique is our game overall in comparison to others within the same genre. So there's a distinction between these two, but it all boils down to that same, like, how unique are we? Art style is going to be a hard one for us. Again, as I mentioned before, the cleverness side of things is I try to make our playability, how we build our systems, tied to this. I want it to be built around a mechanic that I find interesting. Now, what I find interesting in my implementation for being clever might not be something that's of interest or cleverness to the judge, but that's okay too. Art style, though. This one is where we're going to struggle the most. We can do some things through code, as we did in the 1-bit shaders. I do intend on whatever art assets we take in, I will be taking in, pre-built assets to save time. One, because we don't have to wait for them to be done. And two, we can just kind of browse through and find something and help drive our art style off of the assets we were able to find, which helps me because, again, I'm not a visually artistic person. But we can use shaders to help us with this. So what I mean by that is we can use our shaders to make vibrant colors more vibrant and dull the non-vibrant colors. So let's say we want blues or reds to really pop, but everything else to be dulled down. And, we can add a mask on things that are not blue based and then crank the blue. We can add glow effects, things like that. Those are all within the realm of things we can do from the shaders work we've been doing. Dithering and grayscaling are the shaders we built in the 1-bit. I would like to reuse some of those things, but it really depends on what direction we're going here on if they make sense or not. I think leaning into glow effects and those kinds of things that we can do programmatically, so we can introduce glow, screen shake, those kinds of things, how we pop our music for sound effects, those all lean into this category. And we can finding sound effects that fit what we need to do or creating them ourselves. Again, I bought a decent mic so that I can do some things. Will give us some good stylistic points if they're implemented well, and requires very low artistic skill. We will likely be doing pixel art once again, just because I very much enjoy pixel art, but also I can manipulate's the right word. I can manipulate pixel art a lot easier than I can manipulate other art styles that we have access to. And so I can do more with pixel art in a shorter time frame because I have done things with pixel art in the past. So this gives us just a little bit of a advantage over the other choices on art styles that we can go with. But this is the category I think we're going to struggle with the most, to be honest. But yeah, judge's choice, this is going to be fully subjective. Yeah, each judge is different, so subjective, valuable. Free to vote how they will on this one. Category for each judge's favorite games, add extra weight. We don't really particularly care about the prizes. So this is what we're looking at. Again, this is what? It's almost noon, so 4 hours. So we're 20 hours away from the announcement on this one, right? Today's 16th, yeah. Again, I will start the stream a little late when we jump into this, just because I will not be up at 8 a.m. local time, where I will be just getting up 8 a.m. local time. I normally wake up around 9. I'm still, in a lot of cases, running off of my years spent in Pacific time. And so this would be 8 a.m. local time. For me, it would be 6 a.m. Pacific time. I usually wake up around 8 a.m. Pacific, which you're used to wake up around 8 a.m. Pacific. I'm up to about 9 a.m. local, which would be 7 a.m. Pacific, which is better. But then it takes me a while to get up and get moving, get the stream started, and all that stuff. So I will shoot for our normal time around 10 a.m., which is when, pretty much as soon as we hop on, I'll pull up and see the theme, and we can start iterating on that. I think that covers all the rules. Again, we can't get the theme just yet. We mocked out our game design document. I guess I could create a project on here. Let's look at these. These are gonna be rough. Honestly, I was not expecting that. I also wasn't expecting that, because there was like 500 submissions on this, I think. Oh no, there's 500 entries. How many submissions were there? Let's do overview. All right, that makes a lot more sense. 20% of the people that applied actually submitted. Okay, that makes a lot more sense then. This is still higher than I was expecting. These are a lot more alignment with what I was doing, especially this one, just because we built a bunch of mechanics and didn't really add anything. All right. Again, these were existing animations. All I did was add shaders to it. I like that they complement our dithering effects, though. And we like the compliment. I guess I could read these for anybody that's not actively watching. So, first comment. Well, I guess we will wait 1 minute, or I guess 2.5 minutes, since ads are about to start. I don't want. I guess we can do the first one. Awesome art and animations with cool dithering effects. Also, not sure if anyone knew this, but you can sprint with shift. Next one, the art style is great. Love the knights. Too bad you had a late start. I generally love to play a full version of this. To be honest, I can't recall playing any stealth roguelikes like at all, so this is very original. I would like to do more with this, to be honest. So we might try and expand upon the concept we started here at some point in time. I'm not sure, though. As I played through this, it started feeling a lot more like we were just building a puzzle game, and puzzle games and roguelikes don't. Randomization of puzzle mechanics seems But all right, we'll be right back after the ads. All right, we are back. All right, let's move on to the next one. From Raphael. I like the dithering. There were a few gray pixels left to prune out. There weren't any gray pixels. But overall, you did a good job with the shaders. It is sad the game isn't finished, but oh well, Game Jam isn't easy after all. And then the last one, it looks decent, but it really lacks gameplay. And I'm very aware of that. I think in the future, you should focus more on how the game plays and less how it looks. I disagree with this. Not because I've spent a lot of time on how it looks, but because we spent less than a day on how it looks. If anything, of all the things we worked on, the shaders were the least amount of time I spent working on this. Again, because I went in with a existing asset pack we'd already found and picked out, and then later added a second asset pack while I was doing polish there at the end and trying to get the stage set up because the first one didn't have the stuff I needed for tile sets. So I spent, I'd say, less than 5 hours in total on the visuals. And that I feel like that shows, because with what I know now, looking at this, again, looking at our screenshot here. Oh, probably shouldn't open that up. I should not be doing this, and I shouldn't have this all black. So how I do ambient lighting would be able to solve this, but it would change how I have to do some dithering. Going back to gray pixels, there are actually no gray pixels on this. I intentionally added. It's actually, I know for a fact there's no gray pixels, because if you look at the shader code, there's two. Everything is one of two color options. I'm not doing. So there's a few different ways that you can do the grayscale stuff or the dithering stuff. My ditherer and my grayscale are in the same code block in the same shader, so they run together, which means every pixel is one of two color options explicitly, with an opacity setting of fully opaque. And the reason I did that is to avoid the potential of having gray. I changed the dithering ratios to address that. So, and this is applied after lighting, which means we don't have to account for that, which is why we get the dithering on our lighting effect as well. That is all intentional. So it looks gray because we did a good job. You know what I mean? So a big reason for that is expanding out the. Actually, let me. If we pop this open, I forgot to switch back to desktop and put it on chatting. My bad. Oh, let me debug, turn that off, and then in the game scene, turn our post-processing on. That actually feels like it might be gray. It shouldn't be. The only way to test this, because I can't zoom in this scale. I wonder if I can see it here. This does feel like it's coming in gray, even though it is. The light, I mean, technically, this should be dithered. What I'm wondering, because when we run it, you see how it's getting the dot applied to it? So the dithering is picking it up and doing that. I think the lighting is separately applying though. So right, we're doing a subtraction on this. This has to be a subtraction in order to do this thing. It does look like it's coming in with gray, in particular here. I can see this light shade where it starts to drop off, which feels like these are generating as gray pixels, but they shouldn't be. This post-processing should be triggering after. Because you can see the line where it goes through on this, where it just blacks it out. That being said, you can see the line, the innermost ring, that feels like it's graying. I can't tell if that's actually, it might be an illusion. Well, yeah, when I put my finger in front of it, the illusion's broken on it. So I think that's just an illusion on my end. I would have to, the only way I can know for certain though, would be, actually I can do it right now. I should have a plug installed to let me grab VisBug. Will you let me grab off window still? I can't find the dropper tool for it, so maybe not. Okay, that's, I don't have a separate one. Okay, well, do we have, I think we have a dropper tool in here. So if we go to color picker here, I believe dropper tool. That is gray. So our lighting is causing a gray effect. This one's slightly more gray. How would we fix that though? Because it's triggering the, obviously it's triggering the dithering as we would expect. So we know the dithering trigger is working. It shouldn't. I guess what we can do is we can stop that. If we go to our dithering. Also, why is our debug collision shapes? Why is that turned on? I mean, it's turned off when it's running, so I guess it's fine. Okay, so if we go into our shader. See, this is what's weird for me. Color dim, color bright. We have overrides for these. So if we go into post-processing, we are assigning these values. Here. Again, this is, there's no opacity being assigned. So we're getting a solid color being passed in. So if by default it uses color dim, so we grab our brightness, default to color dim, iterate through, adding the dithering amount as we go up. If it hits a certain threshold, it will switch from color dim to color bright. And at the very end, if it's in the upper boundary, it will go to color bright. So at any point in time, every pixel on the screen should either be color dim or color bright. So that means we need to do the calculation in light. I think that's our problem. Is this is applying, it's taking lighting into account, but it's not fully applied with light, which is weird. So I think we would need to overhaul how the lighting is applied in order to get this. I wonder if there's a way, without tweaking this, if there's a way we can change the lighting so that it doesn't have a fall off, like a range-based fall off. Actually, I know how we can do that. So if we go into our post-processing, if we go into our lighting, we apply the lighting through a color map on how it handles. So range, no. Right now we have, if we set max distance to 600, set this to 0.1. Huh. So when I did this on another one, so when I was fiddling with another one, I actually set a gradient on this. So I thought I set a radial gradient on this as well. I know what this is. That's because I'm tweaking the wrong thing. Reset this. This is the blackout. So the entire screen is black because of this one. What I need to be modifying is on player scene. So our point light, this is what I need to modify. So this is why we have gray, is because this is gradient. So if we change our gradient, we need it. If we full drop color, which we can do, if we just slide all of these over to here, it goes from white to black in pretty much instantly. But if we do that, then we have to deal with how we're handling. We don't get the gray bands anymore. We don't get these dithered bands if we change to that. So let's, if we change this to blend mode mix, what's that gonna do? That didn't fix our issue. What if we change how we do shadows? I don't think that changes this. I think it only changes, yeah, it only changes how we handle the shadows here. Okay. It's a hard one. I think we have to change it. Because if I do this, yeah, let me just delete this one. It solves that problem, but we no longer get the dithering at the edges. We still have the gray on the banding here, though. So if we change our shadows, this is a pure 1-bit now. But we're not getting dithering around the edges like we'd want. It's wild to me that it's applying lighting, which affects the coloration, and then applies the lighting again at the end. This is effectively what it has to be doing, because our lighting changes are impacting our... Wait, can I undo this? I can't. because our lighting changes are impacting the dithering, which means it's impacting the coloration of our game assets. The dithering shaders then rip out and set to one of two colors, after which the lighting gets applied again. This is a bug I have. The first time it tries to do this, it allows... I need to shift my position a little bit closer. Oh, no. Until he reassesses. I don't know what's going on there. I also don't know why. It's a weird one. But I don't know why. Effectively, the lighting is doing a 2-pass. And the second pass is applying this gray. Interesting. I think the only way to handle that would be to alter, go into, at least, why don't I have a glow effect on? I'm using this for how I do the color, but I'd have to remove the gradients completely in order to get rid of it, which gets rid of the dithering at the edges. And so I want everything with how this is done, except I don't want the grays in here. And the problem is that our shader doesn't allow for it. So when the shader does its computation, we cannot have gray after this is done, which is telling me that the shader is modifying our texture colors properly. This works correctly. And handling everything, and it's supplying a, there is a segment when you create a shader file, it blocks out the options on things you can do. And so I can do, I fragment shaders, there's vertex shaders, which are removed, and then there's light shaders. Oh, maybe that. I mean, that shouldn't, anti-aliasing shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, disabled. It would be a different story if it was like the lines between color, like the anti-aliasing could be making the lines between these two, how that handles this, maybe. And like right at the edges when it transitions between textures, I could see that. But this is full on, you can see it got a gradient behind the dithering. I guess technically with the lighting, it's over the dithering. That bug is really annoying. Once you get moving, it doesn't have it, but also the lines you're seeing going out for the pathing aren't normally there. Those boxes, I have debugging enabled on that. Also, my logic for when you touch it changes to aggro. It doesn't seem to be working consistently. It's fine when they're not actively doing something, but if they're processing something, it's not interrupting like it's supposed to. Nope, this is all 2D. So if I disable the post-processing, this is what it all looks like. Again, the boxes and lines and stuff is the debugging on, because what we just saw there where it randomly tried to go to the right and it's suddenly stopping and twitching and stuff like that. This is all using the built-in A-star algorithm for pathfinding, and it's just finicky. I think at least the one where it's switching backwards randomly, it's trying to allocate back against an old last known position, which is part of what you saw there. This is the last spot it saw my character. And so if I actually leave vision and stay out of vision, it seems to work properly. But when you're going in and out, it's a little finicky on that edge. And sometimes it has to track last position updates And so it shouldn't be using them at any point during following. But I think what's happening is when it's doing that, like that where it switched back, I think something caused the rays to not collide with our character model for like 1 frame. And so it's like, oh, left vision, let's, update to a previous position or to the last known. And so I'm not sure on that one. Thanks for the follow. So that being said, that is unfortunate that I didn't notice that grayscaling on that one. I'm willing to bet we can address this through an update to how we're doing our lighting calculations. I'm willing to bet if we just uncomment this, it's going to cause a weird side effect. Yep. Literally uncommented it. All I did was uncomment the light segment in here, and it's fixed. I do need to... It's fully removed the grayscaling. Unfortunately, as you can see from the outline here, it had a side effect. The lighting, I'm guessing it's probably because there's nothing for the shadow to be cast on. So I'd have to fix that. But problem solved. Uncomment 1 line of code. That's funny. So what that tells me, I'm very new to shaders and I'm still figuring this out. What that tells me is that there's an internal computation that's going on for shaders that determines and modifies what the fragments and probably the vertexes look like from a color standpoint, and supply all that information so you can do things like this and apply the dithering gradients based on how the shadows are computed. And then there's a final pass in the shader that applies an after effect of lighting. And this will full on replace it. And so the default for lighting applies your textured grayscale before fragment generation and again after fragment generation, which is kind of weird to me. But that's good to know. I wonder. A lot of people like the dithering, which is cool. But I do think when we were building this, we actually built it in a pretty robust solution for that. As I mentioned before, we've got our color assignments here. Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. My assumption, or sorry, when we built this dithering algorithm, we actually have step sizes in here. This applies a checkerboard dithering, which is one of the most basic forms of it. I want to switch this, if I can figure out a way to do it. I want to switch this to using a what's the word I'm looking for? Blue noise algorithm. But effectively what this is doing is I take in the number of steps, and if it fits within certain brightness ranges, it fits into the different steps. And the darkest step is 1 in 4. So for every 2x2 area, 1 pixel is black and the other 3 would be white. Actually, no, I take that back. I think might be 2. I think it's 50%. Brightness float, dither check. Mod size. So yeah, it would be 1. So the top leftmost pixel in every 2x2 in the case of the lowest scale, and then would step up to the top leftmost of the 3x3. So it's a 1 in 9, and then it would be a 4x4, so 1 in 16. And so if I add a 1-step dither, we end up with white, black, and then a 25% black for the dithered area, and then a 2-step will add a 25% section and a roughly 10% section, and then 3 dither will add 25, 10, and then whatever 1/16 would be. And then so I can add an infinite number of steps here, and it evenly splits them in the range. So we can, just through variables being passed in, we can tweak the number of steps, the upper and lower boundaries. So we can set 20, right now it's 25% on the upper and lower thresholds are white and black, and then that leaves 50% range that's step dithered. And so we can tweak all of these to apply it, which means we can do interesting things like if we go to our camera, if we go to our post-processing, and then we move this so we can actually see what's going on here. And then we can change our values here. So if we wanted this to be a 1-step dither, black, white, gray. Yeah, it just overrides it. You're replacing the lighting function is what you're doing. We can change the boundary to like a 0.4, which will bring in the bounds on it. We could up this to like a 4-step dither, which gets how we do the gray going out on our bounds. And then we can also do something like if we wanted this to be dim color to be, say, red, and bright color to be blue. Or sorry, that's green. We can do that. So we can do, and this can be changed through code as well. So we can do like color inversions, color shifts, things like that are all built into the shader that we built for the dithering and grayscale. So this was pretty fun. This is one of the few things, there was actually a few things I specifically went into this game jam wanting to work on, and this was one of those. Reset those back. But this was a fun one. I would like to I would like to expand upon what we learned on shaders as part of this. I just realized we went to ad break. All right, welcome back. Sorry about that. Again, Twitch doesn't allow us to disable ads, so our options are 5-minute pre-rolls or 1.5 minutes every 30 minutes. So, hang on, I think sorry. My dog is 13. He's gonna be 13 and a half. He's gonna be 14 here soon, and I thought I heard him do his little boof thing. But as you can see, I started a shader for vision cones. I think I might actually fiddle with that and see if I can get it up and running. That sounds like something easy. Easy is not the right word for that. Something small in scope to work on, because vision is following my character right now. There's a cone that hovers around it, and you can't see it. So what I was hoping for see how the vision shows up here? I want something like that to visualize where they're looking. And so I started this. Again, I wish it wouldn't flip around and stuff like that. They actually have control on like how quick they can move their vision around, things like that as well. So if you watch it here in a second, they do an actual search of an area. But you can't see that without the vision cones being visualized. And so you lose a lot of the strategy for how this is handled due to that. I was also intending on using the vision cones for showing how much you've progressed. Because again, there's a whole bunch of logic that went into these, the AI behind the scenes here to handle their aggression. I call it their alertness. So you can progress through the tiers going both up and down, progressively, and I can tweak those values. If I were to do this again, I would actually condense it from 4 down to 3 and make the values individually tweakable. Because right now it's just all of them have the same progression scale. So being able to change the scale on each thing individually, I think would be useful. He's stuck, I just noticed. Unfortunate. He's stuck in a weird spot on his path too. But not being able to visualize the cones, I think really hurts the game. That being said, as you can see with this, it looks real jank. Like this does not look good on how it's structured because of the 1-bit. So I couldn't, when I saw what this looked like from this scope and this scale, when I saw what this looked like, I was not happy with it. And so I didn't want to spend a lot of time fighting to get the vision cones working on this. Because the second that 1-bit ends, I think this is the way that this game, if I were to continue working on it, this is how I would handle the graphics. I would probably want to do some post-processing still, but it probably won't be down to a 1-bit. But having a proper vision cone that you can see and that we can, do proper colors and shading on would be pretty damn nice, I feel like. So this is kind of what I had in mind for how to handle this. I wanted to use like a secondary shader that would increase the intensity along it, I think, to showcase like where you're at in the progression, and then maybe introduce bands at certain levels to show it like transitioning between the different thresholds. But I'm not sure on that one. Again, I like the core concept. The AI needs some work. Again, we did this in like, if we exclude the day we spent on shaders and the like precursor days of planning and the days we missed from other life events, this is about 4 days of code. Even then, technically, I think if I remember correctly, we started on Monday. And Monday and Tuesday, we just did trying to figure out what was going on with other things and then some shaders. And so we got started on coding late in the day on Wednesday. And so it was more, we'll say Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I worked on it Sunday. So there was somewhere between 4 and 5 days of coding, and it was only during normal coding hours, all except for one of those days. Like when I say normal coding hours, I mean my stream hours. So it was like 6 hours a day for 4 days, and then a 5th day. No, I'd say we probably averaged about 6 hours. I'd say we averaged somewhere around 30 hours of code outside of the... Actually, no, I think including the day we spent on shaders. We were probably about 30 or 32 hours total coding on this project. And the AI system took up a large chunk of it. I did learn a lot with it, though. I would change how I did the AI pathing algorithm stuff, mainly on the AI side of how it locks on and does all of its pathing, to be honest. Near the end, I think I finally refined how to do the lighting and the AI's apply application, the collisions, lighting, and AI's navigation meshes onto tiles. I think I got that pretty well. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. I had to sneeze. And so if we could pop in here, the tile sets for this section make it pretty nice and easy. Now that I figured out how to do it. If we go to our scenes and we open up map, you can see I just threw this together pretty quick. Here. Again, the intention for this was to procedurally generate our maps. And so part of that was creation of these, like an exit object and these pillar objects. So these are placeable entities that we can just drop in. The floor tiles, it's hard to see. Let me go. All right, I go to tile set, floor tiles. If I zoom in a little bit, we can change our paint section. Physics layer 1. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we can apply physics layers. We can apply navigation layers. If I switch to here, you'll see navigation layers are on these. It's kind of hard to see. They're inset into the center of the tile. This is a thing I learned when I was doing this. So we can set a tile size, inset the navigation mesh, and then in the project settings, under... Is it 2D navigation? No. I'm pretty sure that the title was navigation. Navigation, there we go, 2D. We can set the connection margin. So again, I have 16 by 16 tiles, and we have it inset to where it's half the total width, which means our inset is 4. And so the inset between two tiles is 8 pixels wide. So if we set a connection margin of 8 pixels, which is the 2 times this, so it's the distance between these two here. If we set this as our connection margin, when we draw two of these next to each other, they're within, the navigation meshes are within 8 pixels of one another, and so they connect. And so this will turn into a single block in our navigation mesh. We can then, this is something I figured out later, but I haven't done. We can add, we can add into, I'm not sure where it goes. I'll have to look into that one more. But you can add custom code on how these overlap in our tile sets. I haven't looked into exactly where to add the code, so I need to figure that out still. And I haven't actually done it. But you can write custom code that will check to see if tiles are overlapping and delete them. I manually deleted them. So if we find this pillar, there's no tiles under that. That was one of the bugs I ran into with my navigation mesh. This has tiles that block navigation. Underneath it has tiles that allow navigation. And so it would hit the edge, and sometimes it would think it could navigate over them. Sometimes it would think it couldn't. And so it was real finicky. Even whenever I wrapped this in a avoidance object, it still tried to navigate over it. So I was watching a thing, and apparently you can write custom code that will check and see if there's overlapping tiles and have it automatically delete tiles underneath. So with the introduction of that code, I would be able to procedurally generate a layout and then procedurally add structures over it that could potentially block navigation, like here. And that's the last piece I'm missing from the actual procedural generation logic for getting these maps auto-generated. And that's kind of where I stood on that one. In the past, I've done a card system for power-ups, and I've never messed with AI. I've never messed with vision cones. I've never messed with AI navigation meshes, or lighting or anything like that. And so that's a lot of those things were stuff I want to do in here. So that for our next game jam, we have the core knowledge to be able to just jump through and churn out those things to give a lot of the polish that I just haven't been able to do historically. But that's where we're at now. Tomorrow, like I said, tomorrow we're going to be starting the Pirate Software Game Jam 18. That is what we will be doing for the next 2 weeks. Right now, we don't have a team for it. I don't know if I want to get involved with the team. Couple reasons on that one. Oh, hey, look, script. This is probably where we would add the script logic for... Oh, hey, that's for the pillar. You can add a script. Okay. I'm willing to bet we just tie a script to this, and we can run the logic inside of it. I'm willing to bet if we look through here, there's a... It's probably just, like, draw. But I don't know if we want to do anything with a team. Teams are very hit and miss for me. I'd spend a lot of time working corporate and being stuck with, you know, I know it's not technically a team, it's coworkers. You don't always get to choose your coworkers and things like that. And sometimes it's works out, sometimes it's a giant pain in the ass. And it's the exact same thing. It's like, you know, school projects back in the day. Like sometimes you get a great team, sometimes you get a team that's just there to freeload because they wanted the credit for it, you know. Yeah. Like we did for the 1-bit, we missed the first 2 days more or less. And so, but it was a week-long one. It was meant to go 7 days. We got to work on it for 5 days. Yeah. This next game jam is a 2-week one. So I don't always enjoy, like, sometimes you get teammates that are enjoyable to work with, and sometimes you get teammates that aren't enjoyable to work with. And I'm doing this because I want to, like a for fun thing, you know what I mean? Patch notes game jam? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Like patch notes for game jam, or a game jam focused on patch notes? Interesting. Game jam for duct tape fixes. I like it. Yeah, it looks like they have it split into 2 groups. One for people that are starting a new project, and others that are iterating on the previous game jam. They start later today. I like that. Yeah, they also support browser builds, which is what I'd use. I like this approach. AI, for better or worse, AI is more or less here to stay. We opened a box and we can't unopen it at this point, and so it's going to stick around. It might it will over time change what that looks like and what that means. But at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be touching things. And so having a clear, like, you build the thing, but have AI support you in different ways. And this is stuff like, yeah. Yeah. So, for example, when it comes to art, if you're using modern tools, even before this recent explosion of AI and how it's touching and everything, even before that, going back a few years, tools have existed that have AI built into them, specifically in image editing and like photo manipulation for like AI removal of backgrounds to help just make that process easier for people. And so a blanket statement of no AI use immediately means a lot of people that have been using it in the daily for sometimes years, and in some cases close to decades, now all of their work is thrown out the window because AI has become way more prevalent in other areas. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. So I like that approach of like, use it supportively. The focus here is on creating something yourself, not on the AI. So make sure that it's focused on you, you know? Yeah, I know, right? I'm just going to err on the side of, again, I don't use AI for much. It'll be like, if I use it at all, it'll be stuff like, I did a Google search and AI is built into Google now. So it gave me an AI response. Like, or Copilot built into VS Code. I opened it in VS Code. I was doing something. It auto-suggested something. It aligned with what I was doing anyways. So I just pressed tab to save myself 100 keystrokes, you know? Yeah. So now in the case of the Pirate Software Game Jam, it is a fairly naive one, but they specifically use a specific phrasing. 18. That to me says it's fine in certain scenarios. AI generated content is the key word here. As long as I am not producing what I would consider content for my game, then it doesn't fall under this category. So if I'm using it for, I know, right? And so that's the upside, is it's vague. So in my mind, content is, I can't use AI to write the narrative. I can't use AI to create art assets, and I can't use AI to create music, because that's what's the content of your game. Everything else is code and mechanics, and I don't consider those content. Just like I don't consider, when I'm building a website, I don't consider the the logic behind your horizontal scroller. I don't consider that content. I consider that like infrastructure, mechanics, stuff like that. The images that go into it, yes, or the text that goes into it, yes, that's content, obviously. But the code to make it do its functionality is not content. And I would never see that as content. And they expressly call it out as AI generated content. Now, 99% of the code I write is going to be code I write without any AI input, because I've been using the Godot's built-in editor. But sometimes I do switch to VS Code, particularly when I'm doing refactors. Like if I think of a better way to do something and I want my key bindings and structural inputs to be able to jump things around and bulk find and replace and that kind of stuff, I'll switch to VS Code. And the second I switch to VS Code, Copilot runs. So granted, I have it trimmed down to just being, unless I specifically click a button, AI's entire input would be the auto suggestion stuff. So, hi. I feel like we've done about everything we can prep work. I don't want to spin up. I don't want to write any code. They have a pretty rigid structure here, if I remember correctly. On, I'll just pop this back over here for now. On top of this restriction thing that makes it silly, game jams are partly to get people more confident in games industry and get a job. Some go off and do their own thing, yes. But if you join a studio and say I don't use AI at all, good luck. Yeah, it really. So a couple comments on that one. First off, I don't see joining game jams as a way to join, like, get a job. I do this because I want. It's like it'd be cool to make games. End of statement. Like, if I can do that and make money off of it, that'd be awesome. If I do that just because I want to, that's perfectly fine as well. So I don't see this as an avenue towards getting a job, because I don't intend on getting a job in the games industry. Because the way I look at it is, when I first got into software development, I did it because I loved software development. And then I got corporate jobs. And after a couple of years of doing something I loved and then being told how it had to be done in specific ways and what I had to work on, it really ruined software development for me. And I am enjoying building games. So if I can make money off of it doing my own thing, that would be awesome. But I don't want to turn it into a corporate job, because it's just going to, much like everything else in software development, it's just going to ruin it for me. Yeah. And so if it will make money, great. But I don't intend on it making money either, is the thing. I'm doing it because I want to learn more about developing games, because I am enjoying myself right now. I don't plan on this becoming a, like, money-making avenue or a long-term position for me. You know what I mean? I have other things that I can do that will make more money. Well, make in the short term, and then in the long term, a more reliable avenue for money. If I make the next Stardew Valley, obviously it's going to be more money than I'd make through normal means. But that is such an outlier that banking on that is not a great way to go. You know what I mean? So I'm just doing it mostly because for the love of the game. We'll leave it at that. And I know a lot of people do that as well. It's a hobby, I guess, is the best way of thinking of it. But I agree with your second statement on, there are studios out there that, in particular, smaller indie studios, that will be fully against using AI. And maybe a small segment of larger studios that will use zero AI because of a reputation thing they've built. And anything aside from that will lose them their community. However, AI is kind of here to stay, so you might be able to get away with a no AI approach as a coder and be like, I've used AI little to none. I am a coder, and be able to get a job in game development. If you are an artist or a musician and you go in and you pride yourself on using zero AI to create, you're going to struggle, because that means you're not using any of the industry standard tools, because at that point it's built in. Like, auto tuning is technically falls under the categorization of AI. Now, it's not generative AI, but it falls under the categorization of AI. And so, like, if you're using auto tuning to have it like add post-processing filters to your music, or you're using the built-in tools in your 3D modeling, like, for example, Blender has smoothing tools, so you can take two objects, smash them together, and use the smoothing tool to give them more continuous edges that look more realistic. Technically, that's AI. Now, it fits more into the categorization of There's a specific word for it that I'm blanking on right now. It is procedural in its approach, but that fits under the categorization of AI. Yeah. The broad category for it. So I wouldn't recommend using that as a point of pride, saying you don't use it at all, because a lot of those tools have it built in, and even if you don't realize you're using it, you technically are. But if you're interested in getting a job in the industry doing music or art or coding, vibe coding isn't the method you should approach it to, because that means you don't understand how it's being done, and so you're not learning how to do it. When I interview people, I look for some riding the fence. I want someone who can use AI to go faster, but don't need AI to go all the way. Vibe coding is too far. No, AI is too slow. Yeah, I agree. I used to do a lot of interviews. I haven't really since the big AI boom, for lack of a better word. But at the end of the day, I want someone who understands how to do their job and then uses AI to speed themselves up. Which is why I don't, in pretty much everything I do on stream, I very rarely use AI. My very, very early streams, I was using it a little bit to help with the learning phase. But once I got past that initial learning, I use very little AI as outside of it guiding, because I need to know I need to learn it. You know what I mean? Okay. Ads are going to start here in 10 seconds. My fiance is calling. I need to handle some things. So I will be right back. Give me 2-3 minutes. And we're back. Sorry about that. It was perfect timing for an ad, but my fiance was just calling to let me know she made it to the hotel. Yeah, I agree. That's one of the issues that's really been, and that's not a new thing, to be honest. I interviewed people for Amazon for years, like 4 years. I was doing interviews, three and a half, and we would get remote interviews where people would just be the entire time second monitor looking things up. The thing about Amazon's interview process is that phase of the interview where it's remote is like phase 2. The next phase is an in-person interview. Even if you manage to cheat through phase 1 and phase 2, you then do a required in-person interview. And let's assume for companies that gets phased out and phase 3 is now a remote interview as well. The next step is you start working for a company. You can only fake it for so long before people are going to realize, you know what I mean? Especially if you're required to work in person and then you show up and some AI tool is blocked by the network admin. And now you're just like, well, I can't work. You know what I mean? And so what's your plan then? Sure, you got a job that lasted you a month before they realize you get 1, 2, maybe 3 paychecks. And then they're like, oh, this guy is completely and utterly worthless. 1, let's update and refine our interview process so we don't get people like this again in the future. 2, this person's fired. And 3, from that point forward, you cannot use them on a resume. Because if they ever get called which is very common, like call their previous employer, ask about it. Why do you have on your resume that you worked at this company for 2 months, 3 months, something like that, and then left? And now you have to explain how you got a job with a company and then got fired because you couldn't do your job. Or you lie in your interview. And then let's assume you can manage to do this. Eventually, you're going to get a point where you're in one of 2 situations. You stuck with a company long enough that they just kind of kept you around because, it's like, he can only work 50% of the time when AI is available to him, but he gets stuff done, so we'll keep him around. Or you end up in the situation where you're in an interview and now you have to explain why the last 6 companies you've worked for, you couldn't keep a job for more than a month or 2 at a time. And you've just completely ruined all future prospects. Because that's one of the things companies will look at when they're doing an interview, is because it's expensive to hire people. It's expensive because you have to pay all the people to go out and do, like, find the people, then you're taking up multiple engineers' time, hours of people's time, doing the interview process, their prep for it, their post-op, stuff like that. It's expensive to a company. They are unwilling to take risks if they can avoid them. And if they look at your resume and you can't keep a job for more than a month or 2 at a time, and they know they're about to have to dump $10, $20, $30,000 on doing this loop or more in some cases, with the risk of doing it again, they're just going to go with a different candidate. So you might be able to fool people in the short term, but if you aren't learning this and you're lying about your capabilities, it's screwing you over in the long run. So I completely agree. There's no benefit to you or the companies you're interviewing for to fake that at any level, at any point, unless your entire goal is to pay next month's rent. You know what I mean? And then screw it for every month after that because you've just ruined your career. So but it baffles me. It also baffles me because I did an interview not too long ago, which is also one of the reasons why I'm working things out with the company now that puts me in a position where I have control over the overwhelming majority of the stuff I work on. More importantly, I have control over my hours. And it'll be more of a consulting style thing instead of an actual employment thing. But regardless, one of the reasons I went down that path and started looking into that is because it's less lucrative for me. Is because I did some interviews and one of the companies I interviewed with just kind of ruined the entire process for me. When I went into an interview loop and my entire interview segment, the entire coding portion of my interview, which is my strength. I'm 15 years in industry. The thing I know how to do is code. I can do the other things that are required of my job. And I've learned them and I've picked up the skills and I can talk to people about them and stuff like that. But what I know is code. That's what I specialize in. I'm a technical person. I go into an interview loop and the entire coding section is AI coding. Yeah, that was my interview loop. I had, there was the other things about it, like system design, stuff like that. But AI coding was the entire technical portion. That was the only technical portion. They didn't care how good I was at coding. They cared how good I was at using AI to code on my behalf. And that immediately turned me off for that company. Like, I am just so uninterested in a job where my role is delegated to like writing tests and docs. That's like one of my least favorite parts of the job, you know? So yeah, I looked at that and I'm like, oh God. And more and more companies are trying to do this, specifically smaller companies that fit into that middle ground of like new startup oriented companies that are trying to phase into the scaling portion really love this, and it is going to bite them in the long run. Because I've seen the quality of code that AI outputs, and it is not long-term sustainable unless you've got engineers just pouring over it, and in the end costing more time than just doing it themselves would have been in my experience. Then they're going to end up with a lot of issues. The more they lean into AI in its current state, the more likely they are to have performance or security issues down the road with its current state. I know that not everybody's going to agree with that, but as someone who has spent the last 15 years coding and then has spent 6 months trying to learn everything I could about AI based coding and vibe coding and stuff like that, I can say with 100% confidence that the code that is generated from prompts, both my own prompts that I have used, as well as prompts I found other people use, and the code that gets generated from them, the code quality is not there. And it makes sense because it is a large language model. It is statistically the most likely result, like the most likely path that people are going to follow. Might be a hot take on this one, but the majority of code that is public and available out there is not good code practice. It is way more likely to find anti-patterns, especially on open source projects, because statistically speaking, your open source project is going to be abandoned within a year, but continue to exist on an open source repository indefinitely. And so, statistically speaking, how you did something 10 years ago when you were first learning that was a huge anti-pattern, and then repeated a few times before you learned better, you have more code out there that's bad than you have now that you have a decade of experience or more and is now considered good. You know what I'm saying? And we trained it off of all that bad code. So, expect bad code. That's all I'm saying. It is useful, don't get me wrong, especially when prototyping. But relying on it to build production code, I mean, use at your own risk, I guess. But all right, jumping back into this. I think we're in a pretty good state on prep. I'm kind of tempted to see if we want to go the route of finding a team. I'm hesitant just because if I don't go with a route of a team, I know I'll be able to complete something and it'll be it'll be an enjoyable experience for me. If I go and find a team, it's a coin toss whether or not it's going to be an enjoyable experience. It always sucks when you end up on a team and you talk to people and they seem chill and stuff like that, and then you end up in a situation where, you know, one person that was super excited in the beginning shows up one more time in the next 2 weeks, and then you don't hear from them again. And now you've got to last minute try and figure out everything they were supposed to do during that time period. Or you end up majority voted out of something you want to work on something that everyone else wanted to work on. It's the downsides of teams, especially unknowns. So it is a risk. Also, I'm still trying to recover, so I'm a little concerned on joining a team, on finding a team that wants to work like weekends and not weekdays. And so they're wanting to work a whole bunch tomorrow and Sunday, and I'm still in the recovery phase, and that kind of screws over the team if I can only work one of 2 weekends, and that's what they're focusing on. So I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe if I can find, I'll reach out to some of my friends that are on the more creative side. I've already reached out to a few, and none of them were interested in doing a game jam. But I've got a couple other people I haven't followed up with that I know I've more recently been getting into stuff. One of those is more of a visual person too. And so maybe I can find someone that's wanting to do something that I've either worked with or at least interacted with before, which reduces the likelihood of it being as much of an issue. But we did create a scaffold structure for our game design doc. I didn't set up an itch page. I guess we could do that still. This one's pretty small. I mean, if we do Pirate Jam, does this have... Nope. 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 What am I doing? Game jams. $15,000, 16.3 thousand, 716. That's a bit of a fall off. I don't know what Game Jam 17 looked like. Can I see other jams? Game Jam 17. Wow. So 17 took a pretty hefty hit. What was the theme on this one? Only one. I don't follow. I don't keep up with the political space around pirate software. But I vaguely remember, probably, I'm guessing, 8 months ago. When was this? July? 7 to, I don't know. Within the last year, I do vaguely remember some, what's the word I'm looking for? HR, political snafu going around. So I'm guessing that might have had an impact on these game jams. I originally got into it, what was it, 15? I think I submitted for this one. Yeah, this is the one I did. So I originally got into doing game dev as part of this game jam, Pirate Software 15. Because I found Pirate Software back then and was interested in it and got me involved in it, and I wanted to follow through with this. So I did. I did a game jam on this. I did the GMTK on this one. Or, sorry, 2 weeks after this one. GMTK 2024. Yeah. I haven't been able to touch it since, but part of my interest in this was derived from this original game jam for me, which is why I really want to do Game Jam 18. It is unfortunate that the entries are going to be falling off at such a crazy rate. It's hard to do positionally worse when there's less than a third of the submissions. You know what I mean? That's also wild to me. Like, whatever the political stuff that was going on might have happened partly during this, maybe, because that, you know, join to submission rate dropped pretty significantly between these two as well. I actually didn't get to be involved in this game jam. I did these two. This was before I wanted to join one, I couldn't. A few years later, I was able to join my first game jam. This is my second game jam. And then I wanted to join more, but I just couldn't. Like, it didn't allow for it until this year. And so we put together something for the one button. I wasn't happy with it, so we didn't submit. We submitted for the 1-bit. We saw that earlier. But schedule didn't allow for the incremental. There wasn't really anything I really enjoyed, interesting, that I could come up with on this. Time frame overlapped it pretty heavily with both this and this. This and this. So we had 2 game jams that were conflicting with it, so whatever. But I'm excited to do one more under this umbrella. Hopefully they manage to pick things back up, because it would be nice to have an actual decent size group once again, so I can compare to how I did when I first got started on this. Again, I did this with the team in stuff I'm familiar with, as opposed to this one and this one being run, I guess this one too, technically, in Godot, which is all new to me. So let's go ahead and create. Actually, I don't want to create anything because it's so easy to set this up, to the point I got this one that there's no point in putting a placeholder, to be honest. It's like 2 minutes of work without having images or titles or anything. So I don't even want to go through that. What else we got? So this is an old one. I don't want that. I want the new 18. Honestly, it's really just deciding whether or not we want to go through with a team. So I'll maybe follow up with some people off stream, check things out. I don't really have much else to do on stream today. I'm trying to take it easy, and we're 3 hours into stream, so I might just call it for today, just so I can have a little bit of extra time to rest. I'm feeling okay. I just don't want to push myself, because if I overdo it today, then I might not be able to stream tomorrow, which would suck, because that's when the game jam starts. So I'd rather err on the side of cautious. Might play some games later. What time is it? 1 p.m. We'll see. For now, I'm going to say no. I might just do that off stream, laying in bed or something like that, just to take it to the easiest possible. But tomorrow, 10 a.m. is kind of what I'm shooting for, which will be about 2 hours after the theme announcement, because it's 8 a.m. local time for me. So 10 a.m. local time would be 11 a.m. East Coast, and no. Yeah, 11 a.m. East Coast and 8 a.m. West Coast. A little bit of variability on the time there, but that's roughly what I'm shooting for right now. We will decide on the game jam theme. I would like to knock out, we'll get the theme announced. I would like to figure out what we're going to do from a mechanics standpoint, so we know what we're trying to build. Get the, maybe a working title, some structural stuff put into place, maybe some menus and entry level stuff on the coding side. Although I don't want to, my focus tomorrow is less on the coding and more on the planning side. It would be nice if we could knock out the majority of our game design document and all of our ideation, so that Sunday off stream I can knock out some of the coding stuff, and then Monday morning when we pick stream back up, then we can dive fully into coding. And that will give us a good starting point for 2 5-day on-stream coding weeks. 2 weeks of 5 days on-stream coding. Brace that correctly. I think that will put us in a pretty good spot. Like I said, I would like to do some coding this weekend. At the very least, though, by Monday morning, I want to have it buttoned up on what we're building. Even if we haven't started much on the way of building it, what we're building is the important thing to get through this weekend. And like I said, that will start tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern time, U.S. Eastern time, and 8 a.m. Pacific time. Thanks for joining me. Let's find someone to raid. Actually, is there? We might not raid. We don't have much in the way of people watching today. So, yeah, I think we're just going to end the stream today. There's no point in doing a solo raid. So, thanks on Twitch, at least. Thanks for joining me for the duration today. Like I said, 10 a.m. Central tomorrow. We'll be back, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.